Our reporters are deployed in different locations across the country to bring you minute-by-minute updates on Freedom Day celebrations. At this hour, Junior Khumalo is at the Union Buildings in Pretoria, while Sipha Kema is in Bisho in the Eastern Cape. Let's start with details of how the Eastern Cape provincial government has prepared for today's festivities. Premier Oscar Mabuyane will lead those proceedings. His province remains one of the poorest and underprivileged in the country 30 years into democracy. Newzroom Afrika's Sipha Kema joins me now live from Bisho with those details. Over to you, Nasip.
Well, Masachaba, just to start off to show you where we are actually at Bisho Stadium, where 30 years of democracy and freedom will be celebrated by the Eastern Cape government, of course, together with some of those who will be in attendance. Now, when we're talking about freedom and talking about democracy, is there equality or an equal state of living for everyone? Now, I just want to first, before we get into it, just to listen to what one of the residents coming from Duncan Village has had to say about his living condition.
Where's that number? Na kanje mna eyami number la kwathiwa ke iqampele komnye umuntu. Kodwa abantu baselapha namhlanje. Wayiba ke into ekhoyo apha sihlala ke bugqwabeni ehlathini. Nenhlambo ke amanzi angena ezindlini. Nemisele ivilo ndawo sime kuyo ngoku sime kwindawo enomsele.
So that's one of the residents from Duncan Village who was one of the flood victims in 2022, someone who's been waiting for a house, someone who is living in squalor and also having to see sewage pouring right through his structure where he lives. Now, those are some of the issues that we are expecting the Premier to be addressing today because we've seen some of the developments, Masichaba. We've seen, the road works on the roads. Currently, the N2 moving, even the N2 Wild Coast project, even the N2 here in the Buffalo City Metro, N2 in Kema, but there are other key issues and challenges that are still facing this province, such as, lack of housing and backlog within housing, issues with poverty and malnutrition. As you remember, just last year, that was a big story coming from the Eastern Cape, where we saw mothers who opted to rather, murder their children or allegedly murder their children and themselves because of not having enough to eat, because of poverty. And also some of the other issues is that the bucket system is still being used in larger parts of the Eastern Cape. So these are some of the issues that we are expecting, the Premier to actually address and say how long people would have to wait. But of course, this is a huge province and mostly rural as well, surrounded mostly with villages than actually big towns. So that is another thing that we'd like to hear from him is in terms of, spatial development when it comes to also servicing those villages and outer lying areas as well.
All right, that's Sipha Kema live from Bisho in the Eastern Cape. And now let's take you to Pretoria, where President Cyril Ramaphosa will lead the country's 30-year of democracy celebrations. Our reporter Junior Khumalo is at the Union Buildings, and he joins us now. Give us all the latest. I mean, over and above the president's cabinet joining him for the main program, I know that some of the cultural items include groups like Ladysmith, Black Mambazo, and PJ Powers. What's happening?
Indeed, Masichaba. So we do expect the president and the cabinet ministers to start making their way into this venue. So behind me, as you can see, is where the president and some of those cabinet ministers are going to basically be talking about the 30 years of democracy and some of the challenges actually that are still facing the country. Even on this, on my right, this is where some of the guests who are going to be attending today are going to be sitting. As I was talking about it, they are going to be talking about some of those challenges that are facing the country. We know we are in Pretoria, where about last year we had a problem when it comes to Hammanskraal and the water situation. Dozens of South Africans actually lost their lives because of cholera, because of that challenge with providing clean, drinkable water in this province. So there are those challenges that the president still has to tackle while he's also talking about some of the successes. You spoke about Ladysmith, Black Mambazo. This is where they're going to be performing later on. We expect them to also grace the stage along with one of the South African legends, Miss PJ Powers, who we are going to be talking to. She's agreed to speak to us. She's currently in conversation. We'll just ask her to join us now, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us on Newzroom Afrika. It is such a pleasure to have you on our show today. We just wanted to speak to you about the 30 years of democracy and what that means, especially to artists in South Africa.
Well, you know, long live our 30 years of precious democracy. As an artist, it's been incredible from so many points of view. We're able to travel overseas. We're no longer looked at as pariahs, and also I feel that it really has opened up a lot. And our Department of Sports, Arts and Culture has done their best. Everybody looks to the government for everything, but we've got to realize that there's a lot of other things that need to be done. But I think that the only downside for me, and I really would like to put this across, is that, and it's not a downside of democracy, obviously, it's a downside of the minute the cultural boycott went down and we became a free country and we became, accepted in the world. The promoters in this country, particularly the sort of the big concerts, the people that do the volume stuff, they just turned outwards towards the international market, and they just flooded South Africa with international artists and getting international artists to endorse stuff in South Africa. And we were sort of left standing going, what's going on here? And I think I'd love to be involved in putting processes and procedures in place so that South African musicians and artists are protected like they are in the rest of the world. You know, if you go to the States or the UK, you can't just go in and do a performance. So that's what but in terms of the freedom of, it took us such a long time to get to where we are today. And I know that there are issues and I know that we have problems, but we can't not celebrate the amount of people that sacrificed with their lives to get us to this point today. And I'm all about celebrating today. I love my country. I love the democracy that we have, and we just have to build on it from here on in.
But speak to us about that cultural boycott. What was it like living during that time, especially as an artist, not being able to travel overseas, not being able to promote South Africa? What was it like during that time?
Well, it was incredibly difficult. I was offered a record deal with CBS in America, which was the biggest record company in America. And the minute they found out that I was South African, they said, we can't touch you. So it was hard for us. But the plus side of what happened with the cultural boycott, because we were not allowed to travel internationally, because we were not allowed to, I tell you what did happen was we developed in the 80s a music industry, and in the 80s and the 90s, that was really it was comparable to the rest of the world. We developed our own sound. We developed, if I think of the bands, that I was surrounded by, like Harare and Abakonyana and the Soul Brothers, and we developed a uniquely South African sound. And I hope that we don't, because we have access, because of digital as well, to the rest of the world, start becoming Americanizing or becoming Eurocentric with our music. We must retain our flavor.
You were one of those artists, like even in the 1980s that you talk about. In 1983, you performed at the Jabulani Amphitheater. You were given the name Thandeka by a lot of black South Africans because you still went into those black communities that were disadvantaged. How was it like to go into those communities and see how they lived at the time?
It was a great eye-opener, but I am so... I went into my first township when I was 5 years old because my grandmother worked for the African Children's Feeding Scheme. And so it wasn't foreign to me. A lot of people hid behind, we didn't know it was happening. I don't believe that, I think everybody in this country, the white people knew what was happening, but they just didn't want to see it. And they've hidden behind that for too long. For me, going in, I got a backlash from the whites in this country, a horrible backlash. I was called a communist and a lot of horrible names. But the warmth and the love and it was just, what can I say? That was my gift was, I mean, the black people in South Africa have given me, the whites caught up a bit later, but you know, the black people have given me my dream. So it was amazing.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That is a South African legend and a songwriter, performer. PJ Powers was just talking to us about her experiences as an artist in the 1980s when she traversed that separation that was happening during those times. And she was one of those performers. Even though she was white, she still went into those black communities and she was performing in those black communities. And she garnered a lot of black supporters at the time who even gave her the name Thandeka. So if you want to hear her perform, you're going to have to wait until later on when the program starts. She's going to be on stage with Lady Smith Black Mambazo, and some other performers were also going to perform. Masichaba, back to you in studio.
Wow, Mtungwa, thank you so much. What a powerful interview. That one was definitely for the books. Not enough is actually said about what happened during apartheid, what happened to the arts industry, why we were sanctioned, how this impacted on our economy, how this impacted on our freedom. And this is definitely an interview that we should bookmark.